Okay, so we're live on the air with our second Make Cycle, Make With Me Hangout for CLMOOC 2017. And if you're watching live at our website, there's a chat room there that you're welcome to chat away on. We're really happy to be here with a whole bunch of people to kind of talk about connected learning this week, our Postcard Project, and other things that are going to come up as we have our discussion. And I want to just kind of let people know that this is the 5th year of CLMOOC. The first 3 years were generously supported and kind of backed by National Writing Project and Educator Innovator. And then last year, the participants wanted to keep it going. So we are behind the scenes, a whole bunch of us keeping things kind of going during the summer and during the year. And a lot of what we do is around creativity and thinking about learning in the classroom and learning for ourselves and finding ways to connect with each other online, offline, all sorts of different ways. So it's really exciting to think that, we're 5 years into this kind of experiment, which it still is, I think, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen because she's agreed to kind of be the host a bit, and we'll all help as we kind of go along. Karen?
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen. I don't really understand how I got volunteered to do this, and I think it's really amusing that people seem to be thinking I know what I'm doing, so great. We'll just go right along with that. I've been playing with CLMOOC for not very long, and so this is a wonderful time to come together for me and think a little bit about this whole what does this connected learning off-screen look like? And so that's a little bit about me. Who we have with us also, Susan, do you want to say just hello and a little bit?
Absolutely. Susan Watson, and I teach middle school like Kevin. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at an alternative school, which is a school where all the children go who have been kicked out of their regular school. We also have a high school at my school, but I don't teach high school, nor do I want to teach high school. But I love CLMOOC, and I think I came in maybe the 2nd or 3rd year of it, and I appreciate the people that have helped it keep going even when the MWP wasn't able to facilitate it.
All right, Sherry, you're up.
Okay, I'm Sherry Edwards, and I used to teach middle school language arts media, but I am now retired. But I can't let go of learning or education. So, and these people are so inspiring that I have to keep connected. So,
thanks,
that's
Sherry.
Me.
Hey, Ron, how about you?
My name is Ron, and I'm from New London, Connecticut, and I teach college writing. And I also teach as a writing mentor at the Western Connecticut State University professional writing and creative writing graduate program. So I spend my time between those two colleges and universities, and I got into some of these groups incidentally because of lack of funding. No one was really allowing me to go out and find new resources and new ways to learn and think about writing. So I went out myself and did it this way, and kind of blew my brain wide open with these different groups and different thinking. Kevin, some of his ideas and some of his connections have really changed the way I teach, but also changed the way I want to learn and the way I want to think about both connecting online and writing in the classroom. So.
Thanks, Ron. Anna, you want to sign in?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Anna. I was just thinking about that. Yeah, the necessity is the mother of invention, right? So it's driven a lot of us to looking for these kinds of connections that are not necessarily in the traditional forms of schooling and the way we support people. So I guess the way to introduce myself, I taught middle school and I taught high school. So I can share both those camps, Susan. And there's definitely a love for middle school involved in that. But then currently right now, I'm thinking about also ways to support teachers in their learning and their teaching as well. And so thinking about that, what supports we have and and don't yet have, like you said, for teachers to continue their learning. So that's what brought me here, and I was feeling nostalgic today too, Kevin, thinking back at, so there were a few of us involved in those early discussions about 5.5 years ago, and so it's been exciting to be a part of that.
Yeah, thank you all for your leadership with that. And Kevin, I know you wanted to give a shout out to our fearless leader.
I don't think she wanted to be called that, but I do want to say we're going to talk a lot tonight about the Postcard Project that is the theme of this week's Make cycle. And Karen Fastenpower was the one who really got us all kind of connected with that project in a lot of different ways. And she's not here with us on this hangout, but I do want to kind of give her a nice shout out because she's really kind of kept not just that project together, but she does a lot of behind the scenes work that keeps everything kind of flowing. So we really appreciate all that she does. And she'll probably be really embarrassed that we're saying this right now. But you know, she deserves a thanks and certainly kudos for all that.
She does, and she's in the chat too, so I can see her blushing from here.
That's great.
So we were going to start tonight by having Anna kind of share a little bit about her perspectives of connected learning, because I know it's something that you've really thought about, worked with, studied, etc. So you want to give us the rundown on this so that we can talk about it as we see it in our own lives, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, so, well, one thing I was thinking about before our call tonight is about, that's why I was nostalgic, Kevin, is about what were the things we were talking about 5 years ago as we were hoping to make a space for ourselves to connect teacher to teacher, to learn and to push our thinking. And part of the National Writing Project's work at that time, and still is involved in connected learning as a framework, and trying to create a space for teachers to have a connected learning experience. And through that experience, through the production and making and interest-driven work, they then would pick up for themselves both an understanding of some of the principles that came out of this connected learning. It was the Digital Media and Learning Network, which I can explain, and then also see it for themselves as learners, and then also begin to imagine what they could be doing in classrooms to support learning that is what they called connected then at that time. So, so some of those things would be that, well, so the Digital Media and Learning Group, they began as a research hub that was pulling together different studies of learning in both formal and informal spaces, and saying, well, what is the kind of learning that we see as, what are the environments that we see learning just blossoming and is so rich in our times, with the new capacities we have digitally, and also just physically to move. We see a lot more people having higher mobility, physical mobility across the different spaces, as technologies, not just digital technologies, but other kinds of technologies advance too. And so from that work, they looked at all kinds of spaces, out of school spaces, in school spaces, and said, well, what does learning look like? And how could we help promote that? And then they came up with some principles. So some of those things would be, learning is really rich when we follow our interests, and when it keys into our interests. And that kind of learning propels us forward beyond, an assignment or a rubric, if we're really interested in something. Right, so that's not like earth-shattering. We've known that for a long time about learning, but that would be one part. Another one would be that they call it production-centered, so that we're actually making something. We're not just receiving knowledge and then spitting it back out, but we're in the act of making something. What are some other ones? Peer-supported learning, that learning from peer to peer when we have those kinds of multiple types of relationships, also intergenerationally. That's something that was first emphasized in connected learning that sometimes doesn't get as much as a shout out. But when we allow people, and I'm saying allow because typically in schools we don't, peers to teach peers, or intergenerational connections to happen. We see this really rich learning. So there are these different principles about designing learning spaces around those. And I think that this, like we were just talking about Karen, her work on the data postcard, which is the invitation to make this week, really came out of her interest-driven work. And then because we've tried to design the CLMOOC to be this kind of space where people can bring their interests to the table and see if and how that moves us on in our learning with each other, it really has blossomed from there. And I'm thinking about Silent Sundays, which is a photography kind of like same type of just someone's interest. And that was Kim's interest in photography. She has this beautiful photography throughout all these years in Connected Learning MOOC. And now lots of people, hundreds of people, share this idea of looking at things through this lens of photography. So I think that might be a way to just kick off, I guess, some of the history of what brought CLMOOC together, and then also what we've been thinking about and talking about in CLMOOC. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
So,
I think too, if I could just say that, because sometimes I know we're all connecting with technology, and a lot of us use technology, but actually the technology piece is not really part of those principles. It makes it easier in some ways, I think, to do some of those ideas, but connected learning doesn't have to do with the digital piece, which I think is kind of interesting because, for our kind of network, we use a lot of the digital to make our connections, right? We do a lot of online collaborative work and remixing and things like that, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think Anna's point about intergenerational, I mean, it could be a school connecting with, senior citizens home or something, and using them as mentors for stories and things like that. And that's part of connected learning too. So I think it's an important piece of it that we have to kind of keep surfacing, that even though we appear to be using a lot of technology, actually the postcard's a good example of no technology at all. But that is just one kind of tool, but not really the center of the connected learning.
So I guess I was thinking about, we don't need to have technology be at the center of it, even though like a zillion years ago, there was this whole thing about connected teachers that was going on. And I think that sometimes maybe colors what we are thinking about now when we say connected learning. But it's been fun for me in this little postcardy project that we're thinking about, is thinking about where in my real life I am doing learning in this that uses these connected principles. And I wondered if other people have got some examples of where are you doing connected learning in your daily life as an adult, not necessarily as a leader of young people. One of the examples I was thinking about for myself was, there's a rose garden down the street from us, and roses are a very big to-do where I live. And so I have joined this kind of ad hoc group, and we take care of roses. And I was thinking about, well, I'm really not doing connected learning, but here we have some, we're passionate about these stupid plants that have mold all over them and bugs. But anyway, passionate about these plants, passionate about the weeds. And our connectedness is almost through these flowers. And so we're working together. And interestingly, social media is a way that people in that group stay connected about, who's gonna weed in what garden when. So that was just one little example of how I see it in my own life. And I didn't know how other people were seeing it.
I know that in my case, I've taken the postcard idea and started to use it in my real life. And Kevin and I were chatting about how we always say that class I take in the summer, because no one really understands CLMOOC or connected classes or any of that. So that's what I'm always saying every year, and they don't quite get it. But I've been sending postcards out to random people that I care about, and they love it. They don't quite get, why I'm doing it, but they absolutely love it. One of my colleagues has 9 children, and he lives about an hour and a half away. So I send his kids postcards in the summer and give them little challenges and things like that. And they absolutely love it. They really do. And with the art stuff, which I don't feel is art, more illustration, I've connected with a lot of people on social media with the drawing and with the illustration. And we've become, I guess, online friends based on something that we do offline because we share it online. And there's one person who was really reticent to share anything and was having a lot of emotional depression problems. And, you know, once people started building him up and saying, hey, your stuff is great, keep sharing, we like it, he's completely changed in terms of his online presence. He's sharing things. He appears as if he's confident. His demeanor has completely changed. So those connections can be powerful, even though we might be halfway across the world from each other. My 2 cents.
I have to say though, when I think the postcard is pretty unique in the sense that it's one of the few things that people look at and not see as, well, it could be advertisement, but it's something that's welcomed, and it's not something that's just discarded in the mail. And it's personalized, so it usually comes kind of these letter writing and, you know, sending messages back and forth. It really is not a common thing anymore. So I think by creating these things, just like I encourage my students to handwrite some ideas out, because then they think slower and they slow down and really think about it and really have an intentionality about the messages that they're writing down. And I think it works the same way with creating a postcard. But I also think that the postcard in itself can let people know that there's real human people there. I mean, when you post on a Facebook post or you like somebody's Twitter, it all seems kind of, you know, like you're all in the sludge together. But when you get a postcard from somebody, it's very unique, and it's a very different feel and a very different. And obviously, I know some people were showing some really old postcards, and we have a lot of old postcards floating around our city here, and people collect them, and people really want to hang on to them as part of their collective consciousness about who they are and where they've come from. So by creating those kind of artifacts for a group like this, it's important, it's relevant. So
I think that that's something then to add back to this conversation about, is it about the technology? And I would think that on one hand, it's not just about the digital technology, but I would say it is about technology, meaning that a postcard is a technology. And in fact, it uses a lot of different technologies in order to get from, let's see, where did this one come from, right? To get from New Zealand to me, that it takes quite a conglomerate of technologies in order to allow that to happen. But like you were saying, because of our different cultural and social kind of connections too, like you said, like now the act of writing a letter, and you know, the time spent and the idea of a pen and a paper is a different experience socially, culturally, individually than it is typing on a keypad on a screen. And then creating these postcards is yet another different, like you're saying, different pace, different means and texture and feel to it. That so that when we get these and send these or create these, that it is, so I guess it's for me, it's not, I guess I wouldn't say it's not about technology in terms of connected learning, but it is about how different technologies mediate or change or are part of what we make and how we connect and all of that now.
And if I could just add, I think, we just kind of a gross generalization, but, we may really appreciate and understand the value of handwriting, but you look at the average 18-year-old college student, and for them to handwrite, it's very difficult, and it's very different, and it's very outside of their normal socializing. So for them to do that, it takes a step towards exposing their vulnerabilities, their lack of artisticness, their just being out there and saying, well, my handwriting's not that great. Well, I don't care. I just want you to write something down and try to work in a way that you've never worked in before. It is just like us trying new technology that we've never touched before. It's that difficult and that confusing and that, you know, crazy for them. So
it's really interesting to hear you guys, both Anna, you and Ron are both saying, you know, you were talking about connectedness, and it automatically struck me that you're talking about audience, and that word audience is so boring compared to the emotional connection. You guys are talking about the true emotional connection. I mean, even Susan was talking about that really happens when people communicate and share and, dare we say, learn. So I just wanted to throw that in. It really struck me that this is so much richer than that word could ever convey.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Going back to your question a few minutes ago about like where do we see connected learning in our lives, I was just thinking, you know, for me, it's often around music. So I think Karen B is probably in the chat room because she was going to hang out in there, and she and I and Ron and actually Wendy may have popped in too, have been using an online site. So there is technology involved to try to kind of do a song based on the color theme from last week. And so we've been working on it for the last few days together in a way that allows us to collaborate musically, which is, you know, for me, as somebody who likes to make music, that kind of connected element of it is really powerful in a lot of different ways, particularly when we have people from around the world being able to work in the same musical document at different times of the day, depending on what time zone when they're awake. It's just it's still kind of staggering a little bit that we can kind of do that. That me alone here in my studio, which is just a little room, can make music with people around the world. I mean, that's really neat.
Yeah, I see technology as more of an enabler of the connection than the connection itself. We do project-based learning in my middle school, and it's really about using technology to connect. It's not about using technology to be clever. You know, whatever we do, we are able to connect to a wider public audience because of technology, whether it's, you know, somebody from CLMOOC helping us out looking at our work, or we've actually moved, ironically, more toward low tech because the kids seem to be responding to it. They get tired of computers. They get tired of being everything being online and Google. You know, my class, we don't use Google Classroom really, except for surveys or things like that. We just get sick of being online, and we found much more engagement and interest in the things that we're doing that are hands-on and real world than, you know, making them go on Google Classroom and things like that. So we've actually moved in the other direction. We just use technology to then share our public product or our public, you know, have a public audience.
So somebody was, I think it's Mark Wilson, Corbett Wilson on Twitter. I just saw a tweet that was saying, you know, delivering education or, you know, providing an educational space requires many different technologies, and just like delivering a postcard, right? Like there's lots of compilations, and I'm thinking about this. Well, and then he says, so why do institutions always impose an LMS? And so that's a learning management system for those of you not in higher ed. And that's like a big conversation point in higher ed, is there's oftentimes what they call a learning management system, which is a platform that all of the students can connect to their professors through and all of that. And then they're often usually really limited in terms of what they can do. And they're not cutting edge, and they're really, sometimes they feel like they can be inhibiting to me too. But so yeah, so thinking about, if we want to be responsive to if we're thinking about our, you know, this as designing for students, one technology 1 year, just like one activity 1 year, may not be the best way to connect with or push our students' understanding a particular way. And I can see that is the same as what was brought up here about, you know, whether it's one learning management system or not. You know, if we always do the same thing pull out the file drawer and make copies of the same worksheet, right? If we're just using the same platform or the same tool every year, we could be perpetuating, you know, that's that old thing that used to be from the ditto machine to the copy machine, right? And then I can think of, maybe we can think of digital tools that same way if we're using the same tool over and over and over again, rather than using tools that are fit for what we're trying to do in our teaching or learning.
I also think they get outdated, and the people who come to them are not necessarily using them the same way from year to year. Facebook was popular back then, now Twitter, now the next thing. So, you know, we have to learn along with them on the right technology to use for different applications. But I agree, learning management systems can be limiting in the scope of your vision, and you may have great ideas and really cool interactive ways to reach out to your student, but if the platform doesn't really support you in doing that, you can really get stymied, and it's frustrating. So.
Has anybody ever sent postcards to the students? I just had a thought, like, I wonder what would happen if teachers of all, you know, ages, high school, middle school, college, you know, that in the chat there's been some talking about kind of the power of touching, you know, the physical touching of paper to send to somebody. And it just strikes me that that could be a very powerful thing for students to get too from a teacher, you know. Oh, I got a postcard, even if it's in their locker or their homeroom or whatever that mechanism is.
I've done that in the summer before school starts. You know, sent a postcard note to all the students. It's a little different, I guess, because we don't really know each other yet. So it's like setting the stage for the year to come. But I haven't done it during the year. It's just would be kind of interesting to surprise them right over a vacation or something with, you know, a note in the mail. Yeah, interesting.
Well, I've done that. I take pictures sometimes of their little props they have. Maybe their pencils or maybe their shoes, and I put them all together in a collage, and then I print out cards for them and write messages to them. So, oh, there's my shoes, there's my Nikes, you know. So it is kind of fun to do that. So I've done that throughout the year.
My school has postcards that we give out on a regular basis as part of our PBIS program. They're called SAIL postcards. Our acronym is SAIL: Show Respect, Act Responsibly, Initiate Self-Control, and Lead the Way. And I've, you know, in June found postcards in kids' binders from, you know, October. Sometimes we mail them and sometimes we hand it to them. This year, our assistant principal also started saying, you know, if you have a postcard you want to recognize a student, give it to me and I'll call them down for a positive referral. So the postcards have turned into positive referrals instead of we have lots of negative referrals. But postcards are awesome. The kids love them. It's something that they hold on to. They can touch it. They can see your handwriting. It's not an email to their parents. But I think it's been a really meaningful part of our program.
There's a stigma around grading papers and what comments are on there and whether the students can read them. And I've used postcards a little bit to try to reinforce that every piece of feedback you get from your instructors are not necessarily negative. So we try to mix up the conversations in different ways. And I tried using postcards to kind of reinforce positive behavior in the class. And I work with students who have traditional and non-traditional learning disabilities. So for them to be called out, and even for doing a good job, can be stressful for them. So I try to interact with them in different ways and approach them in different ways that give them. So it's not always, you know, something from the teacher is negative or a comment or something that they have to change their behavior, but rather reinforce them. So I think that's a great idea.
It's really interesting what it does in my head when I think about, like, when the principle about it's a peer-driven or peer-supported learning, you know, this whole connected learning principle. And sometimes I think peer-supported has this idea that maybe we can only do it either outside, like peer-supported doesn't happen in school, does it? That school has this, say everybody's sitting in a desk, and to me, peer-supported has this much more loose feeling, a much more personal, you know, you choose your peers. And somehow this idea of postcards and sharing postcards breaks down some of those more traditional barriers, it seems like, you know, these just different ways of connecting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Go
ahead, Anna.
Oh, I was going to say I actually brought a making it problem to get some peer supported support today. Can I raise my making question here, my quandary? So I've been involved in the Postcard Project for a little while, and a month before CLMOOC began, there was a theme of words, and I had happened to send out, it's kind of worked out just perfectly, some postcards where on the back, well, on the front was this little directions that when they got the postcard, they should look at the back and do some blackout poetry and then send it back to me. And I put my, yeah, oh, hey, there's one coming back to me. So I put their address and then my address behind it, this little envelope. So I got this whole series, and it looks like I'm going to get Sherry's back soon, of different takes on that came back. And just to show you a couple of these.
Anna, could I ask you again? I'm sorry for being such a dopehead. I don't get what you did.
So I took what I took it for this is I took pages from it was Language Arts, which is an educational journal, and it was articles about reading and writing and in terms of in an elementary setting, and I just took pages of it and I pasted on the back of the postcard, and I invited people to then take the text and find kind of like a found poem. Have you done blackout poetry before, where they mark out things that don't then apply, and then they create a poem? And in fact, so I actually am holding up this one that actually was from Kevin. So he printed it out for me. So let me give you an example. So this was just some text, and then the words that are not blacked out in the end say, identify. So this is a found postcard poem. Identify viewpoints as dimensions. Understand experience perspectives. Focus on every question and process conflicting conclusions. Understand people with different perceptions. Information. Provided guided groups think what was happening, so ask different views in response to the author's purpose in writing. So in this text that was like a research article, Kevin found that particular poem. And so this one is a really cool one too. This article was about Columbus Day in school. And so this poem takes the word, these are all the times that it says Columbus, and it's crossed out in a number of times. And then down at the bottom, the only 3 words that are left are claim and control narratives. So that was from Scott Glass, and that's his found poem in that article. So yeah, so then there's this one that says, in the end, the words that are not blacked out, says, Columbus wrote that the textbook could not fight new wording. So kind of, yeah, right? So there's like a whole new message that comes out of these. Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out now what I'd like to do for this make cycle is make something with or in response to all of the poems that came back to me. And I'm trying to think about this in terms of this one, the paper ripped off. So I don't know whose that was. But I got another deck. So I'm trying to think of just, I'm hoping for some peer ideas here of what could I do to either practice connected learning, because I know that a part of this too is not just posters, but postcards on that theme of connected learning. Any ideas that pop into your head?
You know, when you just fanned them out like that, for some reason, I got an image of, well, I guess maybe it was the connected learning image with the circle, with all the circles around it. And I wondered what would happen if you put the postcards in those circles, not necessarily that they correspond to the different themes of principles of connected learning, but just to even take and position them like that, and then see maybe how they speak to each other. Maybe there's a poem that comes out of all of those cards, do you know?
Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty cool to put them out there to everyone and have them, at the very least, reorder them or put them in some order that makes sense to each person, or create the story, kind of like what I put with the antique postcards, create the story or find the thread of what's there. I would love to see all of them. After, you know, as a person who did one little piece of that, I would love to see all of them and try to make sense out of them.
Yeah, I was thinking more like a quilt or like a patched piece that kind of maybe an interactive bigger map that you can zoom into the smaller units and look at them and study them and how they work, because they're also going to work in the big picture kind of big scheme of things, but they're also going to be pretty cool when the more you zoom in and get into the minutia of the poems. So it'd be really interesting.
Sort of like one of those posters that are, you look at the poster from far back and it looks just like a regular image, but then when you look up at it really, really close, each pixel is its own photograph or its own image. That would be really interesting to see if you could pull that off, Anna.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I think actually I could probably use some of the other postcards from other postcard themed months to kind of fill in some of those back and forth. And then still, I do like the idea too of seeing what inviting others to make their own sense of it, arrange it how they'd like, and then.
Yeah, I think if you did that, if you did that idea, I think as Ron was saying, is like a big kind of quilt pattern, right? I was saying you could even use thing link, right? And each kind of square could link to the individual picture. So you'd have the big picture, then you could click on it, and that would be that zoom idea that somebody was talking about. But I bet you if you had that big quilt picture, that a lot of us would remix that as an image somehow, you know, and kind of reshape the image as a whole, which would be kind of interesting, I think. Maybe even make it into a, coloring page.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things that I find interesting, and you guys can maybe talk about this a little bit, is part of the interactive though has to be the flip side, and I'm having that problem with this maker cycle. This is that there's the side that I want people to read and maybe engage in, but then there's this other side where you'd put the address and you'd put the stamp and you'd put those kind of things. So you have a double opportunity because you have the poem and you have this unique thing, but there's also some maybe other content that can be drawn into if they click on them and it flips over, because that could also give you an opportunity maybe to as you did in that one card, to have the poem written out as it was found. So, with all the crossouts, it looks like one thing, but on the backside have the poem as it reads off the card. It just might be just a different interactive and a different experience. But that back part of the postcard became an interesting thing to me, because it's easy to show one image on the computer, but it's hard to show both sides of something that's flat. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Isn't Flipgrid a tool that, I'm not familiar with it, but there's a tool that you can do both sides at once almost, right? I don't know. That might be interesting. But it also made me think about the collaboration that Sherry made was it in Google Slides, Sherry, that you have people making different postcards? And I think I stuck the link in the chat if anybody wants to go and look at it. So you could play around with this idea of making a postcard, and it could be anything you want, and you don't even have to put a stamp on it that you haven't made. So that's just kind of a cool way to think about it. I don't know, and if maybe that would be something to think about too. I don't know.
I'm liking these ideas. This is really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole postcard thing, I think just opened up a lot of doors. And in our little chat, Susan was saying, she wants to do something with all our postcards, and I pulled out my my bag of postcards. Probably like 150 or something at this point.
Yeah, I have these 2 envelopes too.
And I'm like you, Susan. I'm like, well, I want to do something with these, but I'm not sure what. But something's going to come along, I'm sure.
I took mine and I took a really big string, and I started to just clip them onto the string, And then I've hung them around my office so that there are just these strings of cards that are there that, you know, I can look at either side whenever I want. And sometimes, you know, if you've had a crappy day, getting a postcard and just revisiting a postcard that made you smile when you got it, even from somebody you never met, is an amazing thing. And I don't know why that doesn't happen with email. Like, I don't go back and well, sometimes I go back and reread emails, but I don't do that and have a good feeling about it. I do that with the postcards. So it's really interesting to think about the power of touch, right? Oh, Anna's doing show and tell. So there's lots of show and tell going on right now. Sherry's show and telling, showing and telling. Anna's show and telling.
You know, one of the things that I find really powerful about the postcard idea is that it's become a connector point through the year, because, you know, even though we say CLMOOC is all year, mostly it's the summer when a lot of us have some time to kind of play around. And during the year, we're often very busy. But the postcard idea has really been this connector point between, well, there's almost 60, maybe there's more since I looked, I don't know. There were about 60 people on the mailing list yesterday, I think, when I looked. And that doesn't mean that people send out to 60 people, by the way. You know, you might send out to one person or multiple. It's kind of, you know, it's completely the choice of the sender. But getting those through the course of the year kind of reminds me, anyway, of the connections that we were making here in the summer, and then whenever we do little events through the course of the year. And I think that's a really kind of powerful, we're talking about connected learning, right? I mean, that's a really powerful part of that, I think, is it draws us kind of back in a really positive way.
So here's a question, like, it's sort of a which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you feel connected and then send a postcard, or do you send a postcard and then start to feel connected? I think that's, like, there's a lot of names on that list that I don't know who they are. I've never even interacted with people on Twitter. And I find myself thinking, oh, like, a postcard is really personal. How are they going to feel if they get this postcard from someone they don't know? I don't know if am I the only one who's ever thought about that?
They'll feel great. I know exactly what you're saying. Actually, it's funny because I try to find those people that are on the list that maybe I've had a little interaction with or none, and I try to make sure that I send them a postcard. And then it circles back around, because then we often will connect on Twitter or some other place afterwards if we haven't really connected much before then. So I think it's both the chicken and the egg at the same time.
So connected learning, okay, so peer driven or peer supported. So what you're talking about, Kevin, is like peer support in slow motion. You know, like, developing a peer group doesn't have to be a fast thing, right? Like in Twitter, it's like, okay, we're gonna have a Twitter chat, we're gonna connect, and these people are gonna become my people. But with postcards, it's like this, it's more like molasses, you know?
I agree totally with the molasses theory. I have been fascinated by these antique postcards that I found last week on my vacation. This one was 1908. I don't know if you can see that or not. From the Bowery of New York.
Wow.
And I found four. I really just grabbed a pile, and then I went back to the vacation house with my family and looked through them and realized that 4 of them were from the same family.
Wow.
And, you know, being a treasure hunter, I went back the next day to see if there were any more from that same family. And there were a series of 9 postcards that went from 1908 to 1941, all from the same family. And of course, you wouldn't find that with emails. I don't know where these came from. I don't know if they were purchased in an estate sale or what. But having the address, having the people, I've been looking up at the addresses to see the pictures of their houses. Found some of the obituaries of some of the people that are on the postcards and trying to track the family. I just feel like this, you know, holding this in my hand, this was written in 1908. There really isn't a way of explaining that. It kind of gives me chills, you know, and then to find 8 more postcards from this family that tracks kind of what they're doing until 1941, right before Pearl Harbor. And then, you know, we all know what happens then. You know, this whole thing is fascinating to me. And I feel like we're creating these artifacts for people that you know, are going to be around when nobody's sitting on their computer. You know, the value of these, I think it's hard for me to put into words. I feel really awkward right now, so.
You know, I was thinking about that. Reminded me, I can't remember who the author is, but he told a story through checks.
Yes.
Do you remember that? Do you guys remember what that is?
It's really old. It's been around for a long time.
And it's a series of the checks that are written out, right? So that like it starts with buying some baby shoes. Right?
And the checks, I mean, what you could do with that is you could take, and I've actually cut those back when people knew what checks were, right? Cut the checks up and mix them all up and then said to people, okay, make the story come now from these pieces of paper that you have. How do you make a story up out of just pieces of paper that seemed, you know, if you didn't have the dates or whatever?
Yeah, so thinking about that's really the work of, you're diving into this work of historian kind of work, Susan. It's really powerful in terms of how do we find out, and you're restoring too. I'm thinking about like what sense you're making of it now is part of your story, I guess, as well. So it's not just, you know, we can't go and find their story kind of objectively, especially from 1908 and this whole family, but it's like, I am just hearing how your story of finding these postcards are just so, it's kind of like this time travel, right? Where these two times are meeting, and its importance and its how powerful it is for you to hold that becomes powerful because it was 1908 and it's now. And what becomes meaningful, it comes from now. That's, yeah, I'm really struck by that too, Susan.
Yeah, Anna said it pretty much what I was going to say, but it is connected learning, really. I mean, history and finding these dates, then you finding where they lived, and with the maps we have now and what things look like in the history of things, it is very connective. And we have a lot of history in our town, and I always try to get college students engaged in that process of understanding what happened before they came here and what could happen when they leave here. It's relevant, and it's very connective learning, but it's very hands-on.
It's really interesting because I'm living in this city that is new to me as a resident, and one of the things that I found myself drawn to is whenever we go someplace, there are photographs hanging on the walls of different, you know, whether it's restaurants or of moments in the city's history. And I've started to become really interested in like historical societies and what kind of information they have, like this treasure trove of photographs and other archives. And it makes me think that in a way what our Postcard Project is doing is helping us connect through time and space. And now I've just completely lost my thought. But it would make a really cool assignment for kids, I think, to say, okay, take where you are in time right now and reach back in the space you're in and try to create maybe a time capsule postcard back and forth where you're having this conversation across. It would be a great creative writing exercise, you know?
Has anybody ever worked with digital humanities projects? Because that's what I kind of did in my classes, had them go out and investigate a particular building, a particular time, a particular space in our town, and have them create both visuals and some writing about those things and create a collective of maybe the campus or things that happened or a certain period of time. And they were pretty successful in creating different elements, some stronger than others, but that's any class. You know, you have the strong ones who are very visual and you have the writers who want to write more, but in the end, they came up with some really, really exciting ideas and angles to look at the city. And I like it because I've lived here a long time and I still see it new when they come up with new ideas and new thoughts. So,
how did they present that finally? Was it one big poster? Was it separate projects?
I actually made a digital map of the city and then put points, their projects were points on the map. And then when you clicked on the point, it would open to their PowerPoint. So.
How did they like doing it, Ron? What kind of feedback did you get from them about their experience? Like, what happened?
They liked the fact that I was kind of giving them a different access to history. And I think some of the requirements I had them kind of ride with was that they had to have at least one book source, one online web source, but they also had to physically go to the space and be present in that space. And that was kind of one of the requirements. And we did a whole project around Eugene O'Neill because he was born and lived here and was a reporter here for a long time. And I think some of them were kind of stuck on what they could access and why they would access this person. But we had a lot of interesting, people come in and talk about his plays and his life here and his great moments and his not so great moments in the city. So I think they liked that it wasn't just a static thing that you just find in a book, but something that they could go out and engage in. And the guy wasn't perfect, so they kind of liked the fact that, maybe he wasn't the greatest guy in town, and he wasn't the most popular person in town all the time. So they like that kind of characteristic of the project. So
that makes me think, when I see this principle of the connected learning thing that says interest driven, and I always kind of worry a little bit about but I'm the teacher, I'm supposed to be teaching them things. And it's like it's in a way you almost trick your students into becoming interested. Do you know what I mean though?
Yeah.
So there's got where's that fine line between having something being student initiated? Does it have to be student initiated for it to be interest driven?
Well, I've had fails too, in the sense that write a research paper about anything you want, and it fails because there's so many things, and a lot of the students are just not disciplined enough to get the right size topic or the right feel. So I think there has to be some framework around that before you let them go, and I think that framing helps them also understand the scope and the way you want them to proceed. So I agree. When you say interest driven, I worry about a bunch of people with their just kind of looking at you with their hands in the air going, I don't know what I want to do. And that kind of freaks you out. But as soon as you start to move them around and start to get them excited about a topic, though, they really do move, and they really do start to find their own places in these projects. So,
well, and I think the teaching is the framing of it all, right? And that's really important.
I was just thinking too that just from projects and work in the last several years and thinking through this, we've been talking about interest driven is not just a topic issue, that people are interested in working in particular ways and of being particular, having space to be. They have deep interest in how to be, like Team Awkward. That's very interested in having a space to be awkward, right? And so interest driven isn't just topics and picking topics, or the kinds of, it's also, do I want to work in particular ways? People have deep interest in that, and they have deep interest in being particular people. But I noticed the time I was really also interested in seeing what Sherry's been making this whole time, because I know she's been making. So I'd be interested in seeing that, and then hearing what people are making this week for the Make Cycle.
Oh wow!
Tell us, Sherry, what are you doing?
Okay, well, in talking about community and what we do in our community, our neighborhood is on the west side of the river of Grand Coulee Dam. It's just a few blocks, but our neighborhood has a block party starting in the end of June, July, August, and into September, one day a month. And we all get together and have water balloon fights and potlucks. And we got talking about painting and rock painting. And this is one of the rock painting formats we're thinking of doing, but I put it on this postcard. But you've probably seen around, you paint rocks and then you put your hashtag on the back and you hide them in your community or anywhere, and then people find them and take a picture of it and show that they find it, and they can re-hide it or keep it. And so that's what our little neighborhood is doing now. So, kind of fun. And one of our strategies are, for those of us who aren't artistic, we can put dots on the paper. And I do this with acrylic paint. And don't say anything. my husband's drill bits, that flat end.
What's that hashtag?
Oh, okay, our hashtag is rockin' the coolie. Rockin' coolie, yeah. So
Great, thank you, Sherry. I'm gonna start moving in on wrapping this up, I think, because that hour passed by really fast. Pretty amazing. A couple things I want to say, and then maybe we'll go one last round around, and people can either talk about what they're making this week, as Anna asked, or any final thoughts. So we have 2 Twitter chats coming up on Thursday, one in the afternoon, at least for the Eastern time, and then one in the evening. And all the information is at the CLMOOC website, and we'll be putting it out on the CLMOOC hashtag as well if you want to join us. We're going to keep this conversation going on that day by talking a bit about connected learning in the first session, and then moving into more postcard stuff in the second session. And there'll be a lot of overlap, I'm sure, and a lot of tangential lines that kind of crisscross all over the place as part of that. And you're all invited into that. Also, I just want to mention that one of the people who's going to join us tonight, Jeannie, and I have been kind of cooking up a collaborative story project that we're going to get information out in the next day or so. We're going to invite people to come in and do an exquisite corpse style coloring detective story based on a missing toy from the first year of CLMOOC that Jeannie sent out and never got back. So we're going to send a detective out to find it. And so we're hoping that people will come join us and help write the story, take pictures, and collaborate with us on this kind of project. So we're pulling together all the pieces of it. And that, yeah, that was Chalkboard Man. Be on the lookout for that. And I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to make for my August postcard around connected learning. So I've been really trying to do data all this kind of since January, after reading the Dear Data book and kind of having that the theme. So I'm still trying to figure out how to represent data in ways that make sense. So anybody else want to jump in?
I'll just talk a little bit. I'm doing, I like to talk about fiction and truth and some of my thinking about literature and things like that. So I'm writing fictional news articles that would happen in my town, maybe or maybe not. So they're ending up on little stories on postcards.
That's really cool. I love that idea. I'm continuing to research my antique postcards. It's only been a week, but I'm finding some really interesting information, and I want to put my reflection together. I've already sent out the challenge to CLMOOC to write the story of these people in the Fox family. So I'm hoping at least a couple people will respond to that. I was a little burned out on data because all we do at my school is data-driven decision making. But I'm now getting a little bit decompressed, so I'm going to work on some postcards to send out that have to do with data, and probably some postcards just for fun to all of you. And that's my story.
I was inspired by a reduced priced bin of duct tape, and had all these different colors. So I grabbed these 3, and then I was thinking, like, this reminded me of DIY duct tape wallets and things like that. So I'm going to make a postcard. I'm making postcards. This is what I was working on during our call. That was going to have like an envelope of some sort on the front, and the inside will be a qualitative data snippet of a connected learning, like not quantitative, not numbers, but other types of data of a snippet from connected learning in my life or in lives of young people I've worked with or something like that.
I have no idea, because I just sit here and watch everybody play with these ideas in such creative ways.
Go get your reduced bin and just go play.
I'm looking around now for my little, I have the mini rolls of that duct tape.
Yeah.
And so I'm
I didn't know what I was going to do till I started doing it.
I hear you.
One of the things I've learned from CLMOOC, just start playing.
Yep.
And don't follow the rules. You know, that's the whole thing, that you should, you know, follow your own passions. And so, Susan, you don't have to do data. You're excused. So thank you all for thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been a great pleasure, and Karen, thank you for leading us. And we look forward to all the different connections that we're going to make in the next few days with the Twitter chat and other things. Just so you know, we're going to take a little breather next week, and we're going to take a pause, which we found worked well last year, in between our make cycles, to give people a chance to keep working on what they're working without feeling overwhelmed by whole new ideas. And then we'll kick back in, I guess that'll probably be the first week of August, with our third make cycle, which Sherry is helping to lead. So we're really excited about how the summer is unfolding, and we hope it keeps unfolding in a lot of different ways. So thank you all, and I guess we'll say good night.